Okay. We watched this video. Somebody sent this morning. One of my subscribers sent this morning. I think he's hilarious. I do follow him on a couple of things, or he pops up in my stuff. But this one, they've kind of got us in the road. Oh, let's move him over. Yeah, there we go.
There we
All
go.
Things GenX, why GenX is so sarcastic and why we don't want to be in charge. And that was generally what he was kind of talking about, why we don't like to step up. My workshop this month was on standing in the gap, and it's generally something Gen X really doesn't want to do. We like to just live our lives, do our thing, be sarcastic about current events and stuff because, most of the time we saw it coming and we tried to tell everybody, but nobody would listen. So
He had a really, really good breakdown of, this is the events, because it's never just one event that shapes us. So he went into, these are the events that shaped Gen X, and this is why we built sarcasm. And he did a great job of breaking it down. He kept it entertaining. Definitely go watch the video. So I enjoy the dad bod veteran a lot.
yeah, he's a lot of fun. For those who don't understand the generational breakdown, we have the greatest generation was from like 1901 to 1927. They lived through World War I. The silent generation was about 1928 to 1945. They lived through the Great Depression, World War II. The baby boomers, 1946 to 1964. Post World War, and there was a birth rate spike during them. It was like a baby boom is what happened, and that's why they're called baby boomers. Gen X was 1965 to 1980. We're kind of considered the latchkey kids, the first generation that both parents were working. Millennials, 1980 to 1996, grew up with tech. Okay. For the most part. Gen Z, 1997 to 2012, grew up with cell phones, and it wasn't just tech, it's complete
access, instant access to
yes.
people, to news, to everything.
To everything, yes. Gen Alpha, 2010 to 2024. I mean, we've got iPads in classrooms. They've been connected to the screen since the day they were born, basically. And then Gen Beta is the new, and who knows what they're going to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who knows what they're going to do. Gen Alpha, I get the kick out of the ones, the videos that I see. Gen Alpha is trying to break the internet, and
yeah.
They're like, they're not going to believe ChatGPT or anything else. They're going to give it the dickens, and I love that.
Yeah.
Gen Z, there are so many Gen Z that are like breaking out of the matrix and just like questioning everything. And I love seeing that.
Yeah.
But he was really he did an excellent job. He really did an excellent job.
He did a great job, because I think a lot of the generations love to pick on Gen X. I mean, you guys are kind of the smallest generation. You're the generation, not kind of, you are statistically the smallest generation.
Whole, like revolution and stuff that went on. There was, the silent generation was put on volume, and so they were kind of like checked out. and things that he didn't bring up that kind of came up for me were, you can't put people into this time box because it depends on what was going on in their lives. And
Hmm.
a lot of Gen X was not raised by the silent generation exclusively,
Yeah.
because during our generation, teen pregnancy went ballistic. There were some silent generations that were having midlife babies or late life babies. Um, so we were different. I mean, some of us were teen pregnancies being raised by grandparents in the silent generation. I had greatest generation great grandmothers who were a big influence on my life. So,
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
was
So
a lot there.
there was a lot of
Divorce,
multi-generational mingling in your life, especially.
yeah,
So you
divorce became like normal, very normalized. So we had to deal with everybody had somebody in their family that was divorced if it wasn't their own parents,
right.
you
And
know.
that's something that, so to break it down for the viewers in case they don't know, so Donita, she's Gen X, obviously, if you didn't catch that. So, and she was a teen pregnancy, so she had boomer parents, but they largely didn't raise her for various reasons. And she was raised by the generation before, she was raised by their parents. So, kind of that silent generation with a little bit of influence from the greatest generation before that. So she had some of the values, those hardcore values of the greatest generation, where, you know, um, she had a lot of that influence because they had seen a lot of death, they had seen a lot of suffering, starvation. They'd lived through the Great Depression when people were selling their children for food. And
They came from a time when there was multi-generational homes as
yeah,
well.
yeah. And so they came from that background where community was still super, super important. They didn't have the uh, nuclear family model so much. It was just community living. Your family kind of stuck in the same area. Travel was just not as much of a thing when they were growing up. So family was important, and no matter what family did, family came first. There are some good things with that, but then there's also some bad things that came with it.
Right, right.
So not all family is okay to stick with no matter what. So and then you had the silent generation, like you said, that was a lot of them had been put on Valium and stuff. They had their own things that they had grown up with. And rather than feeling anything, like emotions were just something that you, and quite honestly, in their defense, you didn't have time, money, or circumstances that allowed you a lot of times to feel.
Oh, and they
So,
were the first generation that was really kind of pressured into, you really needed to go to college, you really needed to get a further education, because most of the generation before, 8th grade would have been
their max.
their max in a little one-room schoolhouse, so you had the silent generation that was really, pressured. If you only had an 8th grade education, which at that time was better than, most graduate educations at this point,
Yeah.
but then you considered yourself uneducated. I've talked to very intelligent people who were engineers, could do amazing feats, but didn't think that they were very well educated because they only had an 8th grade education, but they had a better education than I ever had.
Yeah.
The women were encouraged to either become nurses or teachers, and the men, it was the first generation of men that were encouraged to work outside of the home.
Yeah, off the farms and stuff, because so
Yeah.
much of the 30s with the Great Depression had just completely crippled the old school farming and everything. So, as far as exploration, go west, young man, a lot of that had already wrapped up by World War I. Oh, hold on a second. I have dogs out.
Oh. Oh my goodness. Anyway, yeah, the greatest generation, you're talking Titanic era people, they were still, you know, they were still homesteading. They were still homesteading. So, and like out here, people were so far from things that you didn't go to town very often, maybe once a week, maybe once a month. Um, everybody had a garden, everybody did canning and preserving their own food, had a root cellar, things like that. For the most part, um, I've yeah, I obviously didn't experience city life, so I can't tell you that. But the silent generation, they saw that fail. And like part of my family stayed out here in the Dust Bowl and persevered. And part of my family went to California during that time. A lot of that part of the family stayed on the West Coast and are still there today, and some of them came back. So,
Yeah.
you have a lot of influence. So whenever some of the young people are coming up saying, "Oh, this generation's awful," blah blah blah, um, wait a minute,
Right.
think about where
It's,
this is coming from,
yeah. It's one of those things that we can talk trash on a lot of the older generations, but for the most part, we do not understand what they went through to create such grit. And in fact, if any of us went through anything remotely similar, or anytime we read about anything remotely similar, we're aghast. We're absolutely
You're
horrified
yeah, you're
at some of
almost
the things they go
traumatized
through.
just by the thought of it,
Yes.
much less trying to live through,
And
something similar. Yeah.
yeah. And so for those to the greatest generation, the silent generation, they really worked hard. I think a lot of them, there's a point to where they were kind of like, well, that's just how life was. But then there was another side to where they were like, I don't want my children to go through that. As much as that was just how it was, there's no reason for that to continue. So they worked super hard to create a much better life for their kids. And then
Yeah.
that's where
Everybody
the
wanted
boomers kind of came in at.
yes, everybody
So,
was like, "I want my children to have a better life than I had." The problem is you have silent generation that will sit and talk about their lives. And these women, especially out here, will get a gleam in their eyes. And just we didn't have much, and grandma and grandpa were living with us, and maybe aunt and uncle. It was multi-generational family. We lived in a little shack. It was a hard life, but it was a good life. I don't know how many times I've heard that. It was a hard somebody just posted that on Facebook. One of my silent gen elder women, they were posting some memories, and they and one of them said that it
yeah,
was a hard life, but it was a good life.
it was a hard
Good,
life, but it
good
was a good
memory,
life. And there
so
was a lot of, I think, like most generations do, they tend to forget for a little bit that was good, or they want to keep the good, but then make the bad better and make it good.
and then you have
And
new generations coming and looking back and seeing it in two different lights. You have some people who see a romanticized version of the good stuff.
yeah,
And then you have some people who see the bad stuff
Yeah.
and only the bad stuff. They're only seeing it's
Yeah.
basically a romanticized version of either one.
Yes,
And
both are romanticized ones, just
yes,
romanticized dark,
I
and
I
one's
just watched
romanticized
while I was
light.
waiting for you to get on, I just watched another video popped up on my, TikTok, him talking about a black man talking about racism through the generations, and it's like, yes, you did have it in the silent generation. I can't really say that I picked up any of that from the generation before, but I know that, like, our area out here was settled by KKK. So I know that it was there, you know? But I also had a greatest generation grandfather marry a Native American woman, and on both sides of the family, I had that happen with different tribes. So you know, and dealing with the whole half breed scenario coming down the family. So by the time it comes to me, the Gen X is sitting here looking at some of these younger generations that are talking about all the racism and stuff, and it's like that you're making a big deal out of this.
Yeah,
You're making this a problem.
that's the
This
thing.
has not been a problem for us. This has
So,
not. We
and that,
celebrated our multi-generational friends.
yeah, and that's the thing that I really kind of took away from his video, and what kind of got our conversation started was that, the honestly, if I were to sum it up, the biggest thing that bugs other generations, especially these younger generations, about Gen X is the lack of bother. And Gen X, between being latchkey kids and just looking out for themselves, seeing the world fall apart and come back together and fall apart again, seeing leaders and all seeing leaders fall apart and things still keep going, and seeing parents fall apart and families still keep going. They don't have a bother about a lot of things because life is going to just keep going on, and they've lived that. And so, but then you have the millennial generation, which is my generation, that came up, and we were predominantly the children of boomers had been raised in a wildly different world from the silent generation, the greatest generation. So those two generations worked their butts off to make a better world for their kids. And then the boomers, for the most part, in a lot of ways, grew up in a world where there was innovation, there was great leaps to science and education, and they didn't have a bother. They didn't really have a Great Depression. They didn't have to struggle. They it just, and if you listen to the boomers talking about their lives, you'll kind of, and I mean, like, really, really listen. Thank you, sweetheart. You can go put these up now. They'll talk about some of the hard things. They'll talk about, so like, Steven's mom is definitely perfect example of a boomer. She was one of the first. She was among the first in the baby boomer generation. And if you listen to her talk, she will. Steven's my husband, by the way, in case anybody didn't know that. He is Gen X as well. So, but she will talk about a lot that happened. So there was still a lot of the family over everything mentality, even though the families were. So the boomers were seeing the families were just absolutely dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And they were seeing that dysfunction. They weren't having to go out and work in the garden as much. They were actually starting to question, why are we doing all of this hard work whenever we can literally go to the grocery store? So that was the leaps and bounds to food, even, was huge. And then they had society coming out. They had doctors saying that smoking was good for you, that margarine was better than butter. There was all of this stuff where,
First
all right,
generation, I was gonna bring that, the sliced bread. They had the first generation
yeah,
that started having processed food.
yeah. And whether you think that's good, bad, or indifferent, it's just where they were at. We were
Scientifically, you can
and
go
we were
back. Right.
experimenting
You can
with
go back
stuff.
and you can look at the medications that they were being given and things. So, yeah, in
And
my
then it
group, we
became,
were having conversation about what was going on here because,
yeah,
my tin hat girls, right? And I'm like, okay, that that silent generation was experimented on physically. Agent Orange, I mean, you can go through, the processed foods, this stuff. The boomers were a social experiment.
yeah,
There you have the hippies, and you have
yeah.
the first conflict that wasn't actually a war, but they were forced to participate in.
Hmm.
You have the well, I guess Korea is kind of on the edge there, but you kind of
Yeah,
have that in there. And then the Gen X, we start having the GATE program, and we start having these mental, psychological experiments, MK Ultra and stuff. And then the millennials, emotional experimentation,
yeah,
start dealing with the emotional stuff.
yeah,
So there was experimentation that was going on. You can find the documentation
yeah.
on that, and you can go back and see the evidence of it.
And you can see, just how that affected the boomer generation. Still to this day is very social based. Everything is shallow for the most part. I mean, there are always exceptions,
Right.
but for the larger part, whenever you see a Karen, everyone thinks boomer. And no, not right now. And okay, I'm talking.
Because they were encouraged. I mean, the greatest generation had their quilting guilds, and ladies get-togethers and things like that. And then you have the boom or the silent generation, then Avon and Mary Kay starts coming in, right? And then the boomers, you've got the whole hippie movement, and we're supposedly going out into space, and science fiction becomes, you know like reality and stuff, right?
Yeah, and yeah, so the boomers, all you had all of that, and to this day, for the most part, they are very uh how do you want to put that? So trying to be nice here. But for the most part, boomers were very focused on outward appearances. I mean, they had radio, they had TV, even black and white TV that was all about appearances. And
Mhm.
you had to keep up appearances. And you had to
And it
look
was
a
one
certain
way or
way.
another. It
Yeah,
was either we're going to wear the three-piece suit and do the thing, or the hippie, and we
yeah,
refuse to wear the three-piece suit
yeah.
and do the thing.
And so you had those kind of two sides of it, and either way it was appearances, no matter which way
Either
you
way, it is,
went.
yes.
And some of that probably stemmed from they were seeing the dysfunction in their families, and they were like, well, I'm not going to act dysfunctional. And then you had the social influence of you have to look a certain way, you have to act a certain way, you have to be a certain way.
I mean, girls
And
still had to wear dresses to school.
yeah,
You dressed up for dinner
yeah.
still, you know. You didn't go to church unless you had on a suit, or, you know, yeah, it was a whole thing. It was a whole
And then they were also the first generation too, that for a long time anyway, that had easy access to things. So shopping became a thing.
Yes.
Clothes, having more clothes, having more things. So
How much
for
was your first vehicle, Paul? How much did you pay for your first vehicle?
Depending on what you call a vehicle.
Oh, come on.
Well, I mean,
Well, the first motorcycle,
I think the first motorcycle was like $300.
$300. Was
Yeah.
that new or you bought
Yeah,
it? It was new.
It was new.
$300. First car or pickup?
Well, my first car was used. I mean, the Focuses. No, I mean they had in the 50s,
But just throw out some numbers.
My used car was. I gave her $1,500.
$1,500 for a used.
And then the Camaro was $8,000.
Camaro was $8,000
in '79.
In 1979.
And then the first pickup, I could go political too, but first pickup was $13,000.
First pickup, $13,000.
And then the next pickup was. Well,
okay. My first pickup in 1990 was $15,000. So you're going from when did you buy your first pickup?
Well, I was like in 81.
1981, 1982. So within the 80s.
80s, they went through the roof. That one, 87 was as much as the folks' house was in 64.
Okay, so you did have an inflation bump there in the 80s, but from the beginning of the 80s to the end of the 80s, minus the inflation bump, you could buy a vehicle in the tens of thousands.
Yeah. Well, and like Steven's folks talked about their first vehicle, brand new. I think they had gotten it before he was born or right around there. So 60s, maybe in the 70s. But their first vehicle, they paid like $500 for, brand new.
Right.
And so, and then as somebody who's done a lot of housekeeping work and stuff like that, the majority of hoarders that you see are usually boomers. And so you have a lot going on there. And now that we have statistics, boomers are also kind of one of the first generations that we can actually start adding to modern, or have been adding to modern statistics. We have a little bit of information for, silent gen and greatest gen, but not like as far as emotional, mental health,
right?
Stuff like that.
I mean, I think we've got it. You can go back and look. It's like, where did the boomers get the hoarder thing? Well, the silent generation went through the Great Depression, so you had to reuse everything. So the repurpose, recycle thing, that was theirs. That's not new. That was theirs. But they didn't hoard it.
They
reuse things until you couldn't use it anymore. And then
and to this day, like some of the cleanest houses I have cleaned have been from silent generation people.
Yes.
So but yeah, so the boomers got hit with, reuse everything, keep everything just in case. You never know if you need that. But then they kept got buying more. Hit with the shopping social experiment, the consumer experiment.
So rather than using what you've already got, you went out and bought more.
Exactly.
And so it accumulate. Yeah.
Yes. So they accumulate all of this.
And they get overwhelmed because they're working outside of the home. Both people are, both partners are working outside of the home, and you don't have time to keep up with the house and all of the stuff, and you don't want to have to dig through and try to find the stuff to reuse and repurpose. So you just go buy something new and it keeps accumulating.
Yeah. And the boomer generation was also one of the first generations that we're aware of where they were very so kind of in that social experiment thing where you need to kind of be like everybody else, but then you also need to step into your own power, and you need to be unique, and you need to be your own person and independent. So they didn't call it like stepping into your power or empowerment at that point. But there was kind of, you see that especially on the hippie side of the boomers, where there was that stepping outside of the box, be yourself and be independent. And that's where they started breaking off from a lot of the multi-generational.
And that's where it really starts coming in on the Gen
Yep.
X, because we were told, well, if all of your friends jump off a bridge, are you going to jump off a bridge too? So we were taught to stand out different, to stand up for ourselves, to stand up for other people, to, you know,
Yeah.
And
So,
most of us were built in trauma, because we had parents that were raised by parents who went through the Great Depression, which made things very hard and traumatic. And they didn't have time to deal with us. They didn't have the time or the bandwidth to deal with us.
Yeah. So like, okay, so Steven's case, so your case, you had young boomer parents who, you know, you mostly got raised by their grandparents. Other kids, if they didn't have boomer parents, so a lot of Steven's friends as he was growing up, they had older parents that were kind of like right on the edge of being a boomer, not quite. They were kind of right there. Steven's dad was part of the silent generation, kind of right in the end there. And then his mom was the very beginning of the boomers.
Right.
And while his parents stayed together, and he was kind of unique in his generation from that, all of his other friends, all of if their parents didn't divorce, then he talks about like some of the moms that he would see that were just absolutely obsessed with their appearance. If they weren't divorced and working outside of the home, they still weren't home because they were at the gym or whatever they were doing or the beauty shop. They were all the time gone and obsessed with how they looked. And his own mom, he talks a lot about how she, you know, his parents were together, and she didn't really work outside the home or anything like that, but she was always busy doing something else. He still was always left to his own devices.
Yeah, so, a lot of the dads were at the coffee shop, you know, or they worked jobs that they were going
a lot of times his dad was commuting or something like that. His dad was even like traveling to Japan and stuff for work. So there was just and he remembers most of his childhood up until about 13 years old. His dad was a pair of knuckles behind a newspaper, is how he puts it. And then soon as he started getting to be about a teenager, then his dad was like, oh, well, I guess I better take you out hunting and maybe do some stuff with you. So, and I loved his dad. His dad was quite a hoot. So there, you know, that's kind of what
they had no idea what to do with us.
Yeah.
They had
and that's what he talked about too. One of his friends that one of his best friends as he was growing up, his parents were divorced, both of them working. But you know, whenever he came home to his dad was like, I've been working all day. I just want to sit down and have a beer and relax. I don't want to deal with you. And then his mom was, you make me feel old. I need to go look pretty. So I just got off work. I'm going to go spend money on my appearance, whether that was shopping, her hair, whatever. So he had parents that did nothing with him. And that didn't end well for him.
We raised each other.
Yeah. And that was the thing, is that he ended up, this friend of Steven's ended up getting his own house and like moving all of his buddies in. Everybody helped pay rent. And so they had like at one point when Steven went over there, he counted like 17 people deep in this house. And it was just all of them were done dealing with their parents, and their parents were done dealing with them. And many of them,
when we went somewhere, we crammed into the vehicle, whatever vehicle it was. We saw how many we could fit in the vehicle, and just
And
went into
many
the
of
family.
them were not 18 yet.
Yo,
And were not living at home. Their parents weren't dealing with them. So yeah, the Gen X was raising themselves because their parents, whether they were
we cared,
boomer
and we
or
knew it.
silent, weren't dealing with them.
Yeah.
It was, you were an inconvenience.
Yeah.
So
If you got hurt, you got in trouble.
yes, if
You know,
you
it just
inconvenienced
yeah,
them.
it
And I
inconvenienced
can still even remember that with your parents, even up until your mom, even the last couple of years of her life. If anyone
It
was
never
an
changed.
inconvenience,
Yeah.
then she was in their business.
Yeah.
But otherwise, she just wanted you to just not be inconvenient, and she would show up when she wanted to.
Yeah.
So I love my grandmother, don't get me wrong, but we can
They
say
were both
we
like
love
that.
you.
Yeah.
You know, we love this person, but we also noticed this behavior.
Yeah.
So, and that is largely what shaped Gen X and made you guys the latchkey generation, is that these other generations weren't dealing with it. So you
Yeah.
had them
We
breaking
became
away.
overly independent
Yeah.
because we couldn't depend on anybody. If you wanted to do something, you had to do it yourself. You know,
Yeah.
if you wanted something, you had to make it happen yourself. So we, overachievers, and yeah, all of that stuff.
And then you get the millennials, so my generation. And we were largely raised by the boomer generation. That overwhelmingly. So Gen X didn't really start having kids. You are unique in my
Yeah,
situation,
I was right.
because Gen X
And
really didn't start having kids until about Gen Z.
right.
So Gen Z is largely parented by like
Gen X.
early millennials and Gen X.
Yes.
So that's where most of them are coming from.
And your
But
dad's a boomer, so
yeah,
yeah,
millennials were
you got a little bit of both.
parented by the boomer generation. Absolutely.
And I think that's what makes the ones that are more balanced.
Yeah.
And I mean, there can be some toxicity there too. But the ones who are interested in trying to make things better are the ones who got influence from more than one generation there, you know, because I had the the great generation, a lot of influence there.
Mhm.
My great grandmothers were very involved in my life. And then mostly raised by silent generation, my grandparents. And then my parents and their brothers and sisters were more like big,
Siblings.
brothers and sisters, siblings,
Yeah.
aunts, uncles, cousins that were the boomers. So,
And that's kind of where, so the millennial generation got parented by, the boomers that raised us saw kind of what happened with the latchkey generation. And we're like, that's not good. And we're, again, obsessed with appearances. So the reason they didn't like, to this day, even talking to Steven's mom, the reason they didn't want to raise latchkey kids like the generation before is because they were seeing a lot of suicide. They were seeing so many of the Gen X generation commit suicide. And they
either the short way
again,
or the long way. There's a
yeah.
long way to suicide.
Yeah. So they again saw the dysfunction of that. So their fix was to become the helicopter parents. And millennials got the helicopter parents who were obsessed with appearances. So everything, the millennials got hit with, you need to look good, you need to be an achiever, and you need to so they kind of got hit with a bunch.
Increasingly difficult because the processed foods went from just processed to containing tons of chemicals. The ingredients in basic processed boxed foods from the 80s through the 90s changed dramatically.
Yeah.
And then the increased dramatically what they were doing. And so all of the sudden, your whole generation ends up with diagnoses like
Yes.
ADHD and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And
And some of that, I mean, yes, some of that is absolutely chemically induced. And then some of that is also the boomers to this day, for the most part, are obsessed with labels, are obsessed with
yes,
how do you make
because
me
I
look?
absolutely refused. You were very, very active. And I
So,
absolutely refused the label. Everybody
yeah,
wanted, the boomers wanted to label you. And I'm like, nope, nope.
yeah,
You
yeah,
were extremely, and I've come to the conclusion now you're polymath.
yeah.
You're automatically a polymath, and polymath brains work that way. And it's not unhealthy. It just doesn't fit the mold.
Right, right. Yeah,
It's
so you had the boomer generation that, again, as they're raising the millennial generation, they're kind of split two ways. So you have the boomers that go, "Oh, my child has all of these labels." And then you have another generation that's like, "I don't care. You need to get out there and play softball and make me look good. You need to win."
right.
And
Exactly.
so our generation was raised with, you also need to be surface and fake, but a high achiever in an economy that is not conducive to that.
Yeah, the economy isn't, and all of the chemicals that you've been inundated with, the physical, therefore you end up having this body dysmorphia issue because your hormones and everything else have been messed up to a point that all of the sudden obesity just like explodes. And everybody's blaming, oh, I'm not doing good enough, I don't look good enough, I
Well,
don't.
that's the other thing, is that the other side of the millennial coin on all of that is that as the boomers are telling us, you need to make me look and feel a certain way, they're also saying, well, I don't know why you can't do better. Like, I didn't have these problems. To this day, boomers are the people who will do that. Well, I don't know why you can't do better.
I don't know why you can't do it because I did it,
Yeah, I don't know why you can't own your own house. I already owned my own house at 35.
Houses are exponentially more expensive. Just rent these days.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where
Steven's mom, when she came to visit us after we moved here, and she saw like some little houses for sale in our neighborhood and stuff. And I was pulling them up and showing her, and she's like, "They want how much for that? It's only got one bedroom." Oh my gosh. I'm like, "No, this is really good. This is like a really good price. This is going to get snatched up fast." And she's like, "Oh, that's what I paid for like my giant 5-bedroom house, blah, 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 blah." Back in the day, they paid like $45,000 for like a 5-bedroom house.
Yeah. And the same pickup that we paid, 12 to 15,000 for in the beginning of the 80s or the beginning of the 90s is 40, 50, 60, $70,000 now.
Yes, exactly.
It's like exponentially doubled.
And then still to this day, whenever they get hit with that inflation, so all of the boomers still own their stuff, they still own their vehicles, they still own their house. They don't understand why we don't have it together yet and why we can't just do better. So they're kind of pushing a lot of the millennial generation away because you don't make me look good. And then soon as they do get hit with the inflation, soon as they do get hit with hospital bills.
Well, a lot of them are going into retirement. They still owe on those things.
Some of them.
New vehicles. They're used to just buying a new vehicle every couple of years. Some of them still own a mortgage. They've taken out a second mortgage to put the kids through, college or whatever. So many of them are still in debt.
Some
And
of
then
them are,
you
yeah.
add on to that medical debt and things like
Yeah.
that. So on one hand, they don't understand why millennials can't
Get
get
ahead.
on with their lives, but at the same
And
time,
then,
they're, "Oh, I'm on a fixed income and
yeah.
I've got
So
all this."
they
Yeah.
can't or won't help the millennials out. And then, but here's the other thing. So I don't know why you can't get it together. And then as soon as they do get hit with inflation, they're like, well, I guess your generation just wrecked all of that and inflated everything. And it's like,
And then the millennials
wow.
turn around and blame it all on Gen X. And we're
Yes,
like,
yes.
"Whoa, wait a minute. We've
Wait
just
a
been doing
yeah.
our own
And you
thing
guys
here.
are like,
Leave us
we've just been
alone."
existing over here. So yeah. So, I mean, the big thing that I took away from his video is, there's a lot that builds up leading to these generations and stuff. And then just what we don't understand about Gen X, and especially the millennials tend to be really grumpy about Gen X. So one of the things that I had
Everything's
messaged
our
you
fault.
after you sent it to me, is that I was like, I was talking about, okay, so, my husband had quite a fun past. And whenever he wanted to date me, I was overly cautious because I had seen way too many bad relationships, and I was way too happy single to just get into a relationship.
Well,
So
and you were I have to give a little bit of background here now. We raised Catherine and her sister, just younger than her, on Arnold Schwarzenegger, and we were just talking with the younger ones that we need to catch them up on some of the Arnold Schwarzenegger stuff. They're not caught up. But I did not. I got rid of the Disney princess movies.
yes,
We did not watch Disney princess movies. The goal in life was not to get married for my girls. Plus, they were raised on Terminator, okay? So I am a prepper. I will not apologize for it. And my husband's a boomer. I'm Gen X. We balanced each other very
very
well
well.
with
Yeah.
that. And so they did not get an all one way thing.
Yeah.
And so on one hand, it was a shake it off, rub it, it'll be better. And on the other hand, so
Yeah.
it not typical,
Well, and I
my
wasn't a typical millennial having parents from two different generations.
yes.
And then
And
with
we did
such a
have
huge age
appearances.
gap.
We did have
And-
appearances because there was a whole thing in the homeschool
Oh,
community
yeah.
out here that there needed to be appearances. But my idea of appearances was to dress you all up in overalls and put matching hankies or have matching t-shirts on you so I could count all of you easily, have everybody
Right.
dressed the same. I would be dressed the same. So everybody knew who belonged to me. I would be able to keep you all,
Yeah.
in sight.
Yeah.
It wasn't you had to have on, the long skirts and the
Right. Right.
it was a little different.
It was well, and that was kind of my whole raising was just a little different. So homeschooling was not common. There had been homeschoolers that had kind of paved the way to where it wasn't as hard anymore.
Yes.
But it still wasn't common. I remember with cousins even that they were floored. This is still like just a clear memory of them going, your parents are still married?
Right.
I just like almost horrified. Like, what
Yeah.
is that like having parents that are still married? By that point, both of their parents had been married twice in their life.
Right.
We're not even teenagers yet and talking about this. And hold on just a second. So I was unusual in that. I was unusual in the homeschooling. I was unusual with parents with a big age gap. So there was just kind of a lot there where I was different in the millennial generation. And I was also getting to see how being different was kind of a good thing, because even before I graduated, I was done with my generation already. They were just, they were mean. They were the mean girls.
I mean, I thought the
They
Gen
were
X
fake
girls were
and
mean, but
mean.
they were mean.
Yeah. So you had the boomers who were fake but nice, so long as things were going their way. But then you have the millennials who,
And they're
to
just
this
going to
day,
ghost you. If a boomer's mad at you, or a silent generation, they're just going to cut you off. They're just going to cut you off. They're not going to
in a little
usually
bit.
confront you about it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Boomers aren't going to confront you unless they're going to be a Karen about it. And it's going to be like the dumbest thing they can confront you about.
Right.
And then millennials aren't really going to confront you either, but they're just
they're going to do their best to stab you in the back and make your life miserable from a distance.
And that's where I was.
Whereas Gen X is
into a conversation of over this video is I was like, I've listened to my husband's stories of his friends, all of his girlfriends that he's had in the past and stuff. And I've noticed, like, his friends, his girlfriends that were Gen X were a wild ride, but they knew they owned it. And, if they survived it, then, and that was a big if, they survived it, because a lot of them didn't, then they now are to a point where they're like, yeah, I had that, all of that, and it shaped me into the person I am today. And I am a lot happier where I'm at now. And I wouldn't be where I am now if it weren't for those experiences. So as much as a wild ride as it was, like, I could talk to his ex-girlfriends, because when he wanted to date me, I did my homework. I found out who he knew, who knew him, and I talked to people. I talked to ex-girlfriends. I talked to ex-wives, the one that would call me back anyway. And, I got to find out. So, but then the millennial side, so when he started getting into where millennials were in their 20s and old enough to date and kind of showing up in his circles and getting his attention at that point, the stories of them being a wild ride, but then, no, I wasn't. He was the problem. I am not the problem. Everyone else is the problem. And if I am a problem, it's because of my situations and the people in my life who are a problem. I am not a problem. And if everyone would stop being a problem, then I wouldn't be a problem. And what they're now finding, especially the millennials, the older millennials than I am, so the 85 and stuff, they're now getting to an age where nobody is putting up with them anymore. They are they can't get boyfriends if they're still married.
I know.
Nobody wants to put up with them anymore, and everybody's like, okay, yeah, if you're not the problem, then we'll just leave you alone. And then they're still being the problem. And
yeah, I was thrown into the workplace at one point. I was a stay-at-home mom for most of our marriage, but the Lord called me into the workplace at one point, and I ended up in an office full of millennials.
I know, those were fun days. I was like, you see what I'm talking about?
There were like two boomers, one Gen X, and the rest were, two Gen X, and the rest were millennials, and the assumptions, one comment, and all of the sudden you're off the deep end on, oh, you're so racist, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm Native American. I have some of my best friends in high school were Black and Mexican and Spanish and what? What? Because I just could not understand the relationships that we had. I had
Yeah.
a
Well, and
friend
then
that
that Gen X bluntness where
yeah,
you
yeah, it was
guys
just
aren't
it was a
going.
thing. I had this one Black friend that, I called her Salt and she called me Pepper, and
It was funny.
it was funny. We were, whoever thought? Not that racism doesn't exist. I remember the first time I heard half breed, and it just floored me. It's like, what on earth? And it was coming from a parent, a boomer, or probably a silent generation parent that one of the kids had picked up. But, nobody put up with that.
Yeah.
It just,
And,
yeah,
and that's where, again, like the millennials being raised by the boomers and being so appearance driven. The millennials also got into the mindset of I need to virtue signal. So we hear that thrown around a lot in conservative circles and stuff about virtue signaling. And it is the best way, I feel like, to actually describe that, where I'm a good person and I need to signal that. And so
and it's kind of like building your reputation by pulling other people's
yes,
reputations
and
down.
that is what the mean
So,
girl
yeah,
generation, the millennials. So I'm a good person. I'll tell you why I'm better than them because they
right.
made this comment one
The
time.
only reason that
So
I'm a good person is because I'm better than somebody else. And
yes,
it's like, whoa, that's not what no, because we
and
had to grow on our own merit. A lot of times we had to overcome the reputation of our family
yeah,
in order to, build our own reputations.
yeah,
So the
because
idea of coming in and tearing somebody else's reputation down in order for us to climb on top of them is just like, what?
and again, that's because like the boomers weren't necessarily tearing other people down, but they were raising the millennials to, did you see the Joneses' daughter? Why can't you be like the Joneses' daughter? Why can't you do
Or
as
don't you ever
don't you
do,
ever be like,
don't you
this girl,
ever do that?
don't
Yeah.
you ever do this, don't you ever do that, don't you
And
ever
why
make
can't
me
you
look bad,
do that?
and
Yeah.
then why can't you be more like the Joneses?
And I got a lot of that. I got a lot of that. Why can't you be like so and so cousin? Why can't you be more like this? Why can't you be more?
So yeah,
So I
and
did
the
get.
millennials were absolutely raised with that constant comparison, that constant competitiveness. And I don't think the boomers meant for us to turn into the mean girl generation, but we did.
That is
And
exactly
Mean Girls
what
came
happened.
out, and that, like, we made that our whole identity.
Yeah.
Is the mean girl generation, where we're fake and we're mean about it. And we're highly insecure. But if it weren't for you, we wouldn't be. So yeah, anyway, it just we got to really talking about that because of Dad Bod Veterans video, and I think Gen X triggers the millennial generation a lot because we're still dealing with those insecurities,
And
and
then Gen Z just doesn't even know what to do with us. They're
Gen
like their lives
Gen
would
Z
be
doesn't
much
know how to
better
deal
if
with you
Gen X
because
just never existed for them.
yeah,
And some of them have just out and out said that, and that's part of the reason that this has become a thing is because some Gen Zs came out and said this generation should not even exist. They all just need to disappear. We cannot. And it's like, okay, you've grown up with with the internet. You've grown up with the internet at your fingertips, the world at your fingertips. You do not understand what Tiananmen Square did to us. You do not understand, the hiding under your desk because there might be a nuclear bomb
yeah.
happening. You do not get where
and
we
again,
came from.
there's definitely a lot of that where the younger generations do not get where the older generations are coming from, and that's so important to understand. But then there's also where Gen Z is struggling a lot right now with a lot of the same things that Gen X has been struggling with for a long time. They are struggling with the fact that nothing's certain. It's just all uncertain.
Mhm.
The political authority, all authority is suspicious.
History repeats itself.
Yes.
We had parents who ignored what was going on. Oh, that's too bad. That's sad. That's in China. We don't need to worry about it. Whereas Gen Z has got it right in front of their faces constantly. It can't be ignored, right?
It can't be ignored. Yes.
Yeah. And we've got us here and his whole video was on why Gen X doesn't like to step into authority in leadership positions.
Yeah.
That we do it reluctantly. I've heard in this kind of situation consistently with us. One Gen X friend, he's a superintendent of schools, and he said all I ever wanted to be was an English teacher. He wanted a simple job doing simple things. He ended up stepping into a bigger situation than he ever wanted.
And I think that's where Gen Z, so again, this very much triggers the millennials. The millennials are largely the ones parenting Gen Z right now. And along with a little bit of Gen X, but because you guys are literally the smallest generation, that's where we're at. So Gen Z is hearing millennials. So we're getting to a point where we're running out of people to blame for our problems.
Right.
And yes, well, we could definitely blame the boomers, and we definitely still do. It's getting obvious that we need professional help, and it is an us problem. But then we're still buckling down on, and Gen Z is hearing this, where they are hearing us talking in the background like, oh my God, if Christy would just like step up, and like she's older than me and she's been at this job longer, she's so Gen X, like she just hates authority, and so I have to step into this, and then that makes me look like the bad guy. And
we haven't, because the boomers were like, we were overachievers. So we want to learn as much as possible. We want to become as good as possible at our job. We want to do, we want to do the best we can, because we saw the silent generation, or were raised by a silent generation, that it was excellence. You wanted excellence. So whatever you're doing excellence, which makes the boomers look bad.
Yeah.
Because we've been doing it this way for 30 years. There's no reason to change it. There's no reason to get continuing education. They hate continuing education.
Well, and for the boomers, they just inherited excellence, and then they took the credit for it in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
And so, you have a lot of that. And then they hang on to power and their roles,
because that's their identity,
their job.
That is where their identity is.
Yes.
Whereas
they hang on to it
Gen
with
X
grip.
Our identity is not usually in our job. It's in everything else that we do.
And your Gen X's generation values their peace, especially at this point. After the wild ride that you all had, all of you, I swear, all of you have wild stories, and you went wild. You were on your own. You raised yourselves, and then now
been there, done that, got the T-shirt. Where do you think that came from?
Yeah,
been there, done that, got the T-shirt. I'm done with it.
And so you guys are done with that, and you are ready. You're ready to sit back in the garden and enjoy peace. That is incredibly triggering to the millennials, and especially when
we can't. You guys don't know how to move on.
We don't know how to find peace. We're so entrenched in our parents' drama, in our own drama. And we have to also, so many of us have to keep the drama going. Otherwise, it looks like we're the problem. And we are.
You were almost like forced into taking on debt.
Yes. Yeah. We were forced into so much. And, you know, a lot of that aside, you know, the biggest issue for a lot of millennials is that we don't want to be accountable for our lives being the way they are. We don't want to be responsible. And while, yes, we didn't get a choice in a lot of things.
Yeah. And you were helicoptered. You got to do it this way and you got to do it that way. You were micromanaged.
We were micromanaged. We're used to being micromanaged. And then we're also used to being able to pass the buck.
Yeah. And now it's kind of, okay, things are coming to a head. Your parents are either coming down sick or passing away.
Yes.
You know, they no longer do that. They can no longer make all of your decisions for you.
Yeah.
They can no longer helicopter you. They don't have the bandwidth, the physical ability, or they're just not there anymore to do it. And you guys are lost.
Yes. The millennial generation is absolutely struggling, lost in the swamp right now. So half of us have gone out and made like our little hobby farms, or have just buried ourselves in busy work as much as possible to try and get away from it all and try to ignore it. And the other half of us are busy, still being told what to do, still workaholics. I don't know a millennial that isn't a workaholic to an extent. But now we've gotten to the age where we can't blame Stephanie for it anymore. Stephanie's not there. We are now having to deal with or deal without our parents, the boomers.
A lot of them end up looking for it in other places.
Yes.
They end up in jobs where they've got somebody to micromanage.
And that's the thing.
And they thrive on having that toxicity to blame. So it's like, I need that toxicity so that I can blame all of my problems on that, and I don't have to take responsibility because it's this person's fault.
It's
even though there's almost a need for that.
Yes. So that's where the millennial generation is now getting old enough, and especially the older part. The younger part of the millennials are really interesting because they're kind of quiet and doing their own thing. But definitely the 90 to back, the 80, definitely the 85s, and up to about 1990 or 3 maybe. So many of us are just absolutely entrenched in, I have to keep drama and toxicity around me, whether that's in my relationships or at work, so that it's never me that's the problem.
And it's kind of a cortisone and dopamine addiction.
Yes.
The drama becomes an addiction.
Yeah.
That you like physically thrive on if you don't.
Well, and now that I'm an actual certified life coach and have been learning a lot about accountability, responsibility, and what that really looks like, avoiding responsibility and avoiding accountability is its own addiction. Literally, in the brain, it is its own addiction. It is easier in a lot of ways for us to blame somebody else. If it weren't for these men in my life, if it weren't for these jobs, if it weren't for my parents, whatever the situation where I can't be more or a better person, I'm going to blame them or that situation. And then soon as I actually start climbing out of that situation, or I have somebody who's helping me, I sabotage it. I sabotage it. I get a new job. I move. I do something to sabotage the peace that I'm about to
And
achieve.
when you're dealing with people like this, you need to realize it's not personal.
Yeah,
It's not
it's
personal.
never personal.
Whether you're dealing with a Gen X who has not dealt with their trauma and is harsh, or a boomer who has not, everybody's got trauma. Everybody has had trauma, and don't belittle somebody else's trauma and compare it to your own. Just don't, because trauma is trauma, period, end of story. Our brains don't know the difference between, our physiology doesn't understand the difference between a bad trauma and a not so bad trauma. It's just trauma. So,
and
when you're getting
that there is a huge dividing line between Gen X and the millennials, and even who the millennials are raising. Because while yes, the millennials love to talk about how we're traumatized. We had 9/11, we had Y2K, we had da 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 da, and we did, and we inherited a thing that we didn't build, and it sucks. But it's time to rub some dirt on that beach and move on.
Yes. You need to realize your responsibility is you. Yes. You don't have responsibility over this other person. So if you run into resistance or reactionary, somebody that's being reactionary or something, just, step back a second, say, okay, this person is being resistant or reactionary, and they're doing this out of their own insecurities.
Yeah.
They have their own insecurities. This isn't personal against me. They may be acting like it's personal against me. They may think it's personal against me, but it's really not. It's their own insecurities that are causing them to act, react, or, in this way. So, if you can recognize that and then look at your own, okay, why is this affecting me the way I'm being affected? Am I tensing up? Am I, if I'm being affected by what this person is doing or saying, then if you can name that, then your brain will recognize it.
Yes.
And it will flip a switch in there.
That's where millennials suck at this.
Yeah. And that's where we're like, oh, okay, this person is doing this, and it's reminding my body of something that happened back in Timbuktu that I can't do anything about now. It's not about me.
And that's where Stephen is very, very quick on a lot of this. So Stephen has always been pretty reactionary in a lot of ways. And he's, a typical man of his generation. But as he has learned with me about how the brain works and the healthy ways to deal with when we're triggered, or when somebody is trying on purpose to trigger us, millennials usually do, he's learning very quickly how to name it and move on. And he likes it because it's the rubbed some dirt on it mentality.
It really is.
It's him claiming his power back. And that's where Gen X is ticking millennials off, and kind of Gen Z a little bit. Because now, you guys are still growing.
Boomers never will. So if you've got boomer parents and boomer, I don't know if they're capable at this point. I won't put them all in a box.
Right. I can think of like 5 off the top of my head.
You're not probably going to get an apology or an admission or anything of things that they did or said wrong.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. So, and we've come to that
a long time ago.
Yeah.
So your generation, from what I've seen, what I've worked with among them, is that they like it whenever you can give them some tools of, okay, you want to not be triggered by her acting this way. So what you do is you go, oh, I'm about to react. Pause, go, I was about to react to that. I'm really upset Triggered. That's what millennials call it. Triggered. Okay. So what do we need to do? I don't have to do anything. I don't have to get pulled into her drama.
Yeah.
And you guys
My
keep
circus,
up. You
my
go,
monkeys,
oh,
right?
I can let go of it and I
Yeah.
can move on. And then us millennials go, what did you just do? Did you just move on? How dare you?
Yeah. Did you blow
And
me off?
did you just blow me off?
Yeah.
Exactly. And it ticks us off because you're not playing in our drama game and you're not allowing us
not
to
playing the
blame you.
game. We're done.
And yeah, and that's the thing is that Gen X doesn't play the game. So millennials are now getting themselves painted into a corner to where people are realizing they are the game players. And then Gen Z is starting to wake up to that.
I think
Gen Z has been hearing the
We've got
millennials.
2 sets of Gen Z.
Mhm.
Is what I'm seeing.
Yes.
Both in our home. I mean, we've got like 1 set of Gen Z here because of the way we've done.
Every generation
but
has 2
on
sides.
TikTok, you're really seeing it. You've got the ones who are like just questioning everything now.
Yeah.
And saying the way I was raised was wrong. I was taught wrong. There are so many things, and they're seeing the lies and the manipulations and stuff, and they're breaking out of that and they're questioning everything.
Yeah.
And then you have the ones who are like
want to defend
so overeducated that they are like, even though I hate to say somebody hasn't done research. The research you've done, sweetheart, might not have been the research you actually needed to do.
Well,
or maybe you
not
didn't
even
see
some of
the stuff
that.
that you saw.
Some of
Because some of them have got like multiple degrees.
And what I've seen, because I have been the majority generation that I have been life coaching has been Gen Z, has been some of the very early Gen Z. So I'm. It seems like I'm either coaching boomers who do want to be better, or I'm coaching Gen Z. And so for a lot of them, it comes down to they are scared of the possibility of the fallout that would happen, just even in their mind, of if people aren't right and if the system is broken. That's
because it's falling apart. The system is falling apart.
And whether that is the system, like the government,
whatever
that's
it is.
the system at home.
Right.
And more often than not, I find them defending the system.
They're either completely defending it or they're helping tear it down.
Yeah.
They're on one side or the other. It's like if the system falls apart and if everything that I've learned, if one thing that I've learned is not right, then then my whole house of cards comes falling down.
Yeah.
And the other ones are like, let's just pull this card out and let it fall.
Let's let it fall.
And
I think that's kind of why we're seeing the Gen Z generation is becoming the largest conservative generation we've seen to date. Because, whether you like it or not, conservative side, conservative thinking, conservative brains are the ones that are more likely to pull down the house of cards. And so that's where we are seeing that happening statistically, where Gen Z is becoming the conservative generation.
Meet in the middle type of thing that people are so many people are starting to realize that they're not in the newspaper. I'm ultra conservative. Okay. I'm not going to apologize for it. But in order to be non-biased in the newspaper, I would seek out very, very liberal people to interview. And I would do the interview, and then we would end up talking for an hour or two afterwards. And I realized we agree that people need help.
Mm-hmm.
We want to help people. We both want to help people. We disagree on how that should be done.
And that's where I think Gen Z is starting to come to that realization where they've been hearing the millennials gripe about everything when they're not at work. And they're also inheriting crap on a cracker in the world. And they're also seeing authority figures falling apart, seeing systems falling apart. Everything is falling apart, and it's all right here in their face.
Yeah.
So they are already, most of them are not even in their 30s yet, and they are learning how to take the phone and put it down. They literally, I saw a statistic the other day, just this week, where we're seeing Gen Z giving up smartphones for flip phones.
Yeah, going back.
And they are getting to where they are cutting technology out of their lives. And so they are very quickly.
They're wanting to go back. That's where you're getting that cottage core, granny core,
So they are
doing the homesteading or the traveling.
Gen
They're going
Z,
back to the hippie period. They are seriously.
They are absolutely focused on finding the peace. So it seems like half of Gen Z is like Gen X is onto something where they aren't online that much. Okay, honey, no, you're not going to grab chocolate. Put that chair back. So they're obsessed with finding their peace. They see that the millennials aren't doing it. Nothing the millennials are doing is working on bringing them their peace. It's just more ways. I don't care even if you go get a hobby farm with goats on it. We're finding ways to work ourselves to death and just ignore everything that's happening around us and inside of us. And Gen Z is like, okay, that's not working for me because now I'm a nervous, depressed wreck and something's got to give. Gen X seems to have it going on. So you have half of
X or millennials were like, I'm going to wear the t-shirt, save the whales or whatever. I'm going to wear the t-shirt that says, fast fashion's bad, but it's made out of fast fashion.
Yeah.
And the millennials are some of the biggest hypocrites. Just some of the biggest.
They are. They absolutely are.
The Gen Z is like, okay, I'm going to stop using fast fashion and I'm going to start wearing sustainable clothing rather than just throwing things in a recycle bin. I'm going to stop buying things that need to be recycled.
Yes. That's where you have half of Gen Z that's figuring out, okay, my millennial parent or parents are fake, are hypocrites, and I'm going to figure out how to do what they say to do practically and realistically.
Yeah.
And then you got the other half that's trying to defend, because who wants mommy and daddy to be wrong, right? You don't want them to be wrong. And so they're stuck trying to defend the system, whether that's at home, at school, or otherwise. So you kind of got this divide. It's growing more on the side where Gen Z is like, if it needs to break and come down, it needs to break and come down, and I'll figure it out. And so you're getting that growth in that side, and they are literally, a lot of them are buddying up with Gen X. They are starting to buddy up with Gen X and get things figured out, and that could be a very, very powerful combo. If Gen X will, Gen X's biggest issue right now is that y'all need to get off your butts and pony up with somebody.
Right. And
I get it. Y'all are tired.
Whenever we start doing that, we make people mad.
Yes. And you guys are over.
Wake up the sleeping bear, things are going to happen.
Yeah.
And people are finding that out. If we take, somebody said to me at one point in time that I should run for Secretary of Education or whatever here in Oklahoma. And I said, oh, you don't want me to do that. And she's like, why? I think you would be so good at it. And she was a teacher and stuff. And I'm like, because I think the Department of Education needs to be dismantled and abolished. And she was like,
and look at where we're at now.
Yeah, I mean, Oklahoma is considered one of the worst in education. Now, I don't like the way that I know we have some incredibly intelligent young people coming out of the schools. So I don't like the way that's judged. I don't like the way it's graded, and I think
Yeah.
Oklahoma needs to get out of that system and stop teaching for tests and let teachers teach the children.
Yes.
If you are called to teach, you should be able to teach the way God has designed you to teach them,
Yeah.
however that is, and you should be able to teach your class the way you see fit. With I
Well,
realize if it's paid for by the public, then which is a whole 'nother thing. We should be going back to locally taking care of schools, locally run schools instead of we shouldn't have the state, Oklahoma City and Tulsa telling people in the panhandle how to educate their children.
right.
That should
And
not
and
be a
it
thing.
just all across the country, the one size fits all is not working.
It's
It
not
does not
working.
work for children. It does not work for human beings.
Yeah.
We are not one size fits all.
Mm-mm.
And so yeah, and that's where we're seeing
And
like
that's in every area. So if you get Gen X in that position, that's what you're going to end up with is because we see what's wrong
yeah.
and we're not blinded by any preconceived idea.
Well, that's where a lot of the political change that's happening right now. It occurred to me the other day as I was just, seeing names. There was a lot of drama. There's a lot of stuff, all of that. And there's just a lot of stuff. But it occurred to me, I was like, that's a Gen X. That's a Gen X. That's a Gen X. And I'm like, oh, Gen X kind of stepped into the political realm. And that's why things are probably shifting as much as they are. And then on top of that, we have some of the older Gen Z stepping in with them too. So you're seeing that where these two generations who are absolutely done with everybody's crap are getting into the same places together and it's shaking things up.
Yeah. And the problem that you've got is you've got to stay on top of the Gen X because we can become apathetic.
Yeah.
So Gen X can be bought just like everybody else. So whoever is the loudest squeaky wheel, we want to get shut up because we don't want to have to listen to it. And whoever's paying
yeah.
is going
you guys
to get
want to show up, do your job, and go home.
So, you got to keep them accountable. It doesn't matter who's in, it doesn't matter who the generation is, it doesn't matter who screwed things up, and it doesn't matter if they inhaled. That's not the point, and it doesn't matter if he's wearing a dress and makeup or not. That doesn't matter to us. What matters is
the job getting done.
Is the job getting done? So
Yeah.
if somebody
that's where
that should not be paying the bill, let's cut that funding.
Yeah.
And if the job's not getting done, why?
And that's where Gen Z is at too. So that's where I've seen the conversations happening where, Gen X, if you can, you need to be adopting some Gen Z, tucking them under your wing, and you guys need to be buddying up. Gen Z.
And I've been telling, they're like, I am so worried about the kids in this world today. I'm worried about my grandchildren. I'm like, have you taken them camping? Have you done this? Have you done that? Well, yeah. And I'm like, don't worry about it. Whenever it happens, that knowledge will kick in. You gave it to them. That's going to kick in. They're going to do okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess you're right.
Yeah.
My grandma taught me this. My grandma taught me that. And they're bringing it up. They're pulling that up. It's the millennials who are in absolute panic mode.
Yeah, to an extent. Like some of us are, and then the rest of us are
just ignoring. Yeah, I mean, either way is bad. You're either panicking or you're ignoring everything that's happening.
Yeah,
and either way is bad.
Either way is bad. And so, it just one of those things where we need to be teaming up rather than pointing fingers at all of the generations. We need to be teaming up with each other
and realize that nobody fits into this just perfectly.
Yeah.
We
No.
have other influences going on in our lives. So just because I'm of this age and I do things and I have the stories and whatnot, doesn't mean that I just automatically fit into this category, right?
Right.
And you can't just assume all Gen X is racist and all this generation is this and all this generation.
Right. Just like, I mean, statistically speaking,
You don't like
the
it whenever people
boomers.
say, oh, all of your generation is
Oh,
dramatic.
I'll say it. The millennials are all mean girls. So, but statistically speaking, the boomers are absolutely the most narcissistic generation that we have to date.
But they have
because,
absolutely no clue that they're doing it.
no, of
I mean,
course
so
not.
that's what you
And
have to realize is they were
well, and I mean, besides statistics wise, yes, we're finding that out. But then I can think of quite a few boomers just off the top of my head who are not that way.
right.
Yes, they have some shared experiences from their generation that kind of has them they all have a lot of similarities. They
Right.
are going to behave certain ways because that was what society did when they were growing up. That's how they were formed mentally and emotionally. So
Right.
yes, there's going to be some similarities, but a lot of the boomers that I know and associate with, or even coaching, are not the narcissistic type. So we all have narcissistic tendencies. It doesn't matter our age. It just we're born with it. But it's just one of those things where, statistically speaking, boomers don't look good. But then a lot of the boomers I know are not that way. And so, and statistically speaking, millennials are a dumpster fire. But and yeah, a lot of millennials I know are that way. So I don't know. But maybe we'll get it figured out at some point. And
Gen X just going to sit on that burning dumpster or next to it and pour their beer on it,
right,
and stoke the flames.
and at some point, hopefully, millennials will climb out of the burning dumpster and be like, first of all, I am a delight. Second of all, has anybody thought about putting this fire out? And so, but yeah, and I see a lot of people talk about, especially in conservative circles, they're like, oh, this Gen Z, I don't know, it's a blue-haired generation. And I'm like, have you gone outside though? Have you actually talked to any of them? Or are you just watching the TikToks that end up on YouTube?
I hardly ever see a Gen Z with makeup on.
So
Gen Z fingernails painted.
Again, I think the ones that get attention, the ones that we see on TikTok, on YouTube, on Facebook Reels, those are the loud ones that get a lot of attention. And then a lot of people will go, see, look at that generation. But statistically speaking, Gen Z is looking really good. And every time I talk to them, they're doing better than other generations before them.
Those of us who are dealing with things are timeless.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going to put that.
Yeah.
You've got the people that are toxic generation, whatever generation that is. But for the most part, you've got people who are timeless. And
if you are taking accountability and responsibility, yeah. What happened to you, what you inherited,
trying to make it something.
Yeah.
You're just,
it may not be your fault, but it is now. You're
questioning things, but you're still in reality. Those are the things that you're timeless, and that should be our goal.
Yes,
is to learn from all of the generations before us, because there's a lot of great knowledge we've lost that needs to be regained. And it is and
it is important.
But there's mistakes we need to learn from.
Yeah. So I see a lot of the millennials, again, so many of them trying to avoid the problems. And they'll kind of flip to like the other side of the spectrum and be like, well, we need to have multi-generational homesteads again, and we all need to live in the same place. And basically it comes down to, for them, most of the time, they want control. They want it all in one place where they can see it, where they can control it, and then they want to call the shots. And yeah, I want my entire family there except my folks, because they drive me nuts and I can't stand them. And if they do live here, they need to think my way, or it's the highway. And they're not taking the step back and going, why did multi-generational homes fall apart? Like, what was the problem there?
And what didn't work?
What worked
what
and
worked
what
and what didn't
Why
work?
did the
And
boomers
Canto
move
did an
away from that?
excellent job with that.
Mhm.
And Canto showed the generations.
Yeah.
It really did. And showing how that silent generation having a real hard time letting go, you know, silent generation, boomer, whatever, wherever you want to put grandma, you know, not wanting to let go of the power and stuff.
Mhm.
And then the next generation just kind of doing their thing in the middle. And then the next generation, like, I'm tired of this. I don't want to be
Yeah.
what everybody wants me to be. I want to be me, type of thing.
Yeah.
You know, and you see that generational thing and how to work through it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And sometimes
And
things have to fall
that's
apart.
where-
A house has to fall down and things
Yeah.
have to fall, and you have to rebuild. And that's not necessarily a bad thing.
And that's where, you know, the boomers moving away from the multi-generational thing and moving into the nuclear family thing, they were moving away from it for a reason. It wasn't just because they got duped into it. They grew up seeing the dysfunction, knowing, hey, I don't like that. And then that's where it stopped. So they made the changes necessary, and then, you know, and now here we are, and now the nuclear family thing has all fallen apart too in a lot of ways. And so we have people trying to go back to the generational homestead thing. I mean, I've seen that blowing up in a lot of places, or people in general are just craving community now.
Van life, tiny home, community, all of this kind of stuff.
People are dying for
there's-
simplicity and community.
Yes.
We're
yes.
craving that connection.
And the best way to do that is to learn from the generations before you.
Yes.
Not to throw out everything and start from scratch.
Yeah. So instead of just lumping grandma in with the, oh yeah, well, she didn't divorce grandpa because she legally couldn't and she just had to put up with him. Instead, let's like look at what were the healthy families doing? What are healthy families doing? And how can we, and even if we can't look at great examples, what can we learn? So, I mean, for me, becoming a life coach has been eye-opening in learning, okay, humans are humans. We're going to mess up. We're not going to have perfect days ever. We're going to have more bad days than good days. But how do we repair with people? How do we keep our bad days from turning into abuse?
Right.
How do we keep that from happening?
Realizing on a biblical perspective that we do have generational curses.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're not fighting against flesh and blood. We're fighting against principalities and powers. So even if that is in your own family, there are principalities and powers involved.
Yeah.
And so if you can put it in the right perspective and say, okay, we have a generational curse in our family, probably lots of them. Okay. We have a generational curse in our family. See if you can pinpoint what they are. Do it one at a time. Don't try to do it all at once.
Yeah.
One at a time, and say what principality or power may be having an influence over that, and how can I pray and work through this and heal for me and future generations. And
yes.
That's what you need to do.
And it can't just be like the Bible thumping, speaking in tongues kind of way, or no, I'm going to put that down in the name of Jesus. Okay, that's
and then ignore it again.
cool.
Another
And then ignore it
millennial.
again.
Millennial
So-
Christianity is kind of
Yeah.
it's like
So one of the things is that sin,
faith without works.
right? Well, and just one of the things is that sin, or as the modern world, non-Christian world likes to call it, toxicity, the toxic things that literally get built in our brain that we can pass down to our children, those generational curses. Sin, toxicity cannot survive once it's spoken out, once it's confessed, once you bring the light on it.
Right. And it is a
can't
process.
survive.
It is a process. So, it's a journey, it's an adventure.
Yeah.
It takes a lifetime to learn what you need to learn and, to move through this. So see it as that. These are obstacles in the road. They're
Mhm.
bumps in the road, things that you need to either climb over or crawl through, or, a storm that's moving through. Don't make it personal. See it for what it is. Try
Yeah.
to see it for what it is.
Yeah. And it just, and it's okay to admit if you need some help figuring that out. That's why there's
Amen.
people like me that exist.
Yes. Having a life coach myself has been huge.
We're not meant to figure it out by ourselves.
No.
That is not why humanity was created at all.
Yeah.
So, I mean, whether you're Christian or not, you're not supposed to figure it out by yourself.
Yeah.
And that's why it's okay to reach out and get some help.
And I really think getting help from somebody of a different generation is key, because they're going to think of different questions and stuff to ask, and they're going to be less likely to give you the excuses you tend to come up with, So I have a boomer life coach, and she challenges me the way I need to be challenged. Right. Yeah. And so, I absolutely, a life coach is huge.
Yes. So. Yep. Absolutely. So,
well, you want to give everybody your contact information?
Yeah. So basically, okidokilife.wordpress.com is probably the best way to find all of my socials, find email, phone number, all of that stuff. So if you do need a life coach to kind of work through some things with, kind of get some clarity, figure out where you're going, whether that's in relationships, careers, or even the generational curses, we're trained to do that. And it's something that I enjoy doing, and I like digging into that. And so
you've kind of been doing that all of your life and just didn't realize it.
And just didn't realize it. Yeah. I just constantly a spectator of my own stupid generation and going, oh my gosh, she did what? So I'm still
watching me heal through your life,
And that's been a huge thing, is that, that is something with the millennials and Gen Z, is that I do see a lot of, I'm just going to cut them out of my life. And a lot of them are realizing that doesn't work. You don't just, even if they are the most toxic, terrible person you have ever known, you don't really get to just cut them out of your life, especially if they're family. And it's been very helpful for some of those people that I have coached, for me to have seen you go through what you did. And by all of their definitions, I not only should have cut you out, I should have buried you too. And it just, so it's mind blowing for them to understand that you can, in some cases, work through things with people and repair relationships. And it's not impossible. Some people, it's not going to happen. I mean, you have family it's not going to happen.
It
And
became physically dangerous.
it's dangerous.
It became dangerous.
And you don't
Like
necessarily
life-threatening danger.
Yeah.
That we had
And
to
there's a
cut some.
difference between
That is
putting in boundaries, and that's what I'm, learning, is that people hear boundaries, but we don't really know what boundaries are. And boundaries don't cut people out of your life. They set up a gate. And if they're not willing to come through the gate, then they don't get to come into your life.
right.
But if they do come through the gate,
That doesn't mean they're not walking around the yard.
yeah, it doesn't
No,
mean
or
that they're not
whatever.
walking around the perimeter, that you're not keeping yourself safe. But then if they ever do want a truly healthy relationship with you, there's the gate.
Right.
And they can walk through it. So that's just I found out that that's really where I am very good at helping people with complicated family relationships, or even bad ones, and figuring out how to balance that, how to have those healthy boundaries, how to not constantly be in confrontation or in unsafe situations either. And
Or to just constantly be triggered. you know?
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
constantly
if you're
triggered.
living where you're just constantly triggered and you've got this anxiety constantly going on, you can get out of that whether anybody else in your life changes.
Yeah.
You can change your perspective, and biblically that's called the renewing of your mind.
Yes.
And you can get to a point where you can deal with these people without having those reactions.
Yeah.
And that stress. You can still deal with the people and not have the stress.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not always going to be perfect. And I mean, and that's where, again, somebody like a life coach can really help you with that, because it's still something. I'm still working through it. So it's one of those things where we'll work through it together, friends.
Right.
You don't have to do it alone.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's not easy, but it's worth it.
It's worth it. It is absolutely
and of course, you can find all of my information if you'd like to join the community. We go through, so many things in the community. You can go to www. You have to have that, prairie-trail.com. And I've got the free dealing with disaster thing, and the free community is there. So anyway, yeah, this has been fun. We ought to just get on and talk about this here. There might be some other people that will enjoy it. We had some fun in the comments. And so, leave comments and questions. And
there's a lot of comments. I didn't see them. Sorry, guys.
If you would like to do something like this again, leave some topics and let us know what you would like for us to cover. This has been a lot of fun, and we enjoy gabbing. So
yeah, we do be gabbing a lot.
We do be gabbing a lot. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Catherine. And
absolutely.
We will see y'all later.